Chapter 441, An Unexpected Visitor. Transmigrated as a ghost. With the prison break being quite the success, the rebel strike team and those that they had freed were in high spirits, even as they trudged through the snow. However, one person was completely distraught, and when Teja woke up, she began screaming frantically for her brother. It was not a pretty sight to watch as she began crying profusely over the death of her brother. Certainly, they had been on different sides, but she had done everything she could to make sure that he survived. And in the end, when she had succeeded in restraining him, he was still killed. And for the first time, everyone saw an emotion that Teja had never once expressed around anyone. Pure unbridled rage. She looked at Argus like she wished she could murder him, but unfortunately, she had no power to do so. Why? Why did you have to kill him? I already had captured him, and he was in a horribly weakened state. He was not going to be a threat anymore. Teja yelled at Argus with tears streaming down her eyes. You are too naive. Tyval was the most dangerous man in the kingdom. Letting him live would have been a detriment to the rebellion. Argus said, completely dismissing Teja. Yet this only made her even more angry, and she began yelling louder, not caring about their surroundings. Don't preach your commitment to this rebellion. You are barely even a member now. I do not know why you killed my brother, but it was not out of loyalty for our cause. Was it because he had imprisoned you? Or do you just get some sort of sick pleasure out of killing helpless people? Do you not understand that he was not just my brother, but that we were linked together since birth? I felt what it was like for him to have his head bashed apart by you, and now it feels like a part of me has been ripped out. I wish with everything that I could kill you right now. Teja, that is enough. We do not want to attract any unwanted attention and we need to continue moving. Merrick said, intervening in the one-sided screaming match that Teja was having. He had never seen the normally calm and collected mage so enraged and emotional, but he could not allow this situation to persist. For one, it was incredibly bad for morale for the troops to see one of the rebellion's leading figures fighting with Argus, who was likely to become one of the rebellion's pillars in the near future. Also, Merrick found it difficult to take Teja's side, since she had against his wishes participated in this mission by going behind his back. And the person that Argus killed, while being Teja's brother, was one of the rebellion's greatest enemies, and having him gone would be a huge boon for their cause. Looking at Merrick with betrayal in her eyes, Teja stumped off, heading towards the back of the group, where she began walking next to Marcus, who had been silently watching what was going on. I am sorry, Marcus said to Teja after they had walked in silence for around 20 minutes. She then looked towards him and said, you do not have anything to be sorry for. It was Argus who killed my brother, not you. Still, Marcus definitely felt bad for Teja and said, I did not use the talisman you gave me to heal your brother. I thought about it, but ultimately decided not to. Hearing this, Teja looked at Marcus with unbelievably sad eyes, and said, it would not have mattered anyway. Argus stopped me and I doubt he would have let you restore my brother either. No, I cannot be mad at you. Not after all of the help you gave me. Without you I would not have even had a chance to try and save my brother. Teja then lowered her head again, and they walked in silence for another 30 minutes before she asked with telepathy, would you help me kill Argus? Stopping in his tracks, Marcus had not been expecting the peace-loving Teja, who was literally with the blessing of pacifism, to ask this. However, he quickly got himself together and said, no, I cannot. While I understand why you are upset, I do not have a reason to kill him, and doing so would hurt the rebellion, or could even destroy it. I am sorry, but if you want revenge on him, then you will have to find someone else to help you, and I would ask that you at least wait until after the war is over. Sighing, Teja nodded her head towards Marcus before drifting away from him, wanting to be alone. Looking at her, Marcus was not certain if she would be recovering from this anytime soon, and he felt that she might even leave the rebellion. The rebels and freed prisoner continued to trudge along, moving as fast as they could before the inevitable blizzard hit. When that happened, visibility practically became zero, and they quickly made as sturdy a camp as they could within a hidden nook in between two mountains. There was simply no way that they could continue in this storm, as it was likely they could become separated, and even at high levels most people were not immune to the extreme cold. So, they simply hunkered down and waited out the storm that on Marek's magic device that predicted the weather was going to last at least a week. During this time, Marcus did not even try to sleep, as the eldritch horrors he saw still haunted him, and he was afraid that the one that escaped could come back at any moment for the grimoire that was now in his possession. He had not dared even try to touch it again, since last time it began breaking down his soul and absorbing it. Every instinct he had told him to keep away from this item that seemed to be made to bring death and suffering. Yet on the 5th day of waiting out the storm, while he was practicing with his mana circulation trying to increase his control, he suddenly noticed someone sitting on a chair and leaning back with a steaming cup of what smelled like hot chocolate. He had no idea where this person had come from, as they had seemingly just suddenly appeared in his tent, along with the chair and their beverage. Immediately he stood up and took a fighting stance with his scythe in hand, ready to attack this mysterious figure. Oh, there is no need for that. I did not come here for a fight. Just go ahead and sit down and relax. The figure that was wearing a white cloak that obscured their body said to Marcus. At the same time, they waved their hand and Marcus suddenly felt a sort of pressure come over him, as he was forced to sit back down on his cot, and his scythe merged back into him. He tried to break free, but none of his skills or abilities activated, and he could not even go ethereal. It was as if an absolute power had been exerted over him, and there was nothing he could hope to do to break free. Who are you? Marcus asked, seeing that conversation was all he was capable of. You do not recognize me? Wait, I guess this is the first time we have met in person. I am your favorite administrator. Chapter 442, Something That Should Not Be Here. Transmigrated as a Ghost. Hearing this, Marcus' eyes went completely wide, since he was now sitting face to face with the mysterious being that ran this world. To this point Marcus still had no idea what they wanted from this world, and more specifically from him. Yet before Marcus could get over his shock, Roxine jumped out of his companion's storage and hopped into the lap of the administrator, who was leisurely sipping hot chocolate. Roxine immediately knocked the administrator's hood back and began licking their face affectionately. Looking at this, Marcus was stunned to see that the administrator just looked like a normal young girl with brown hair of around maybe the age of 15. Roxine, I know you are happy to see me, but I am here on business. I need to get something from Marcus. Curbing her excitement, Roxine jumped down off of the administrator and took a seat next to Marcus while looking intently at the administrator. Waving her hand again, Marcus felt the pressure that was holding him down disappear. However, he was still at a loss as what to do now. He had honestly not expected to meet the administrator out of the blue right here and now, but also to see that she was just a young girl. And as if she could read his mind, she said, "Oh, this is just my avatar that I use when moving around on this world. This is not what my actual body looks like." Shaking his head, Marcus tried to get his thoughts and emotions back under control. Just one step at a time. Find out what they want first, and then I can see what other information I can get. Once his mind that was in turmoil from the sudden appearance of the administrator had calmed down a bit, Marcus said, "So, what business do you have with me?" "Oh, I got a notification that you tried to appraise something that was not connected to this world's system. That should not be possible, so I did some investigation and found this." The administrator then opening up her hand and revealed the eldritch monster that had escaped him and Tisha. Except now it was shrunk down and completely immobilized, with what appeared to be an expression of terror on both of its grotesque faces. Yes, this little guy should not exist on this world or any of the ones that are adjacent. Unfortunately, I do not know how he got here, but I was hoping that you might, since you appraised it right. Confusion all over his face, Marcus had little to no clue what the administrator was going on about. Still, he at least knew where this creature had come from, and figured that things would go much faster if he just showed her the grimoire he had taken off of Tyval. Taking the horrid book out of his item box, Marcus did not dare touch it himself, and used his spectral arm to hold it aloft instead. As soon as the book became visible, the administrator's eyes went sharp and her calm and collected demeanor vanished. The grimoire then warped out of Marcus' spectral arm and into her hands. She began looking over the book intently, flipping through each and every one of the pages at a breakneck speed. "Those bastards, how did they sneak something like this onto my world without my notice?" the administrator said with fury in her voice. It was quite obvious that she was very displeased to find this book here, and Marcus was glad that her anger was not directed at him. "Is this the only one?" the administrator asked Marcus while holding up the grimoire. Nodding his head, Marcus confirmed that he had only come across the one, and the administrator sighed before storing the book away. "This is just great. This is just one of a set of 5, and now I have to track the others down." The administrator then grabbed her cup of hot chocolate from out of the air where it was floating beside her and took a big sip. After that she looked towards Roxine and Marcus and said, "Well, thanks for your time and handing that book over to me. I have a lot to do, so I will be taking my leave now. It was good to see you again, Roxine, and it was nice to meet you in person for the first time, Marcus." Now that she had finished her business, the administrator got up and was about to leave when Marcus abruptly stood up and said, "Wait. I have a mountain of questions to ask you. Please, can you not stay for just a little longer?" Stopping, the administrator titled her head up as if she was thinking about what to do. "I suppose that you helped me out by securing this grimoire. Without you I might never have realized that these things made it here." "Very well, I will answer any 3 questions you have so long as I am able to." Sitting back down, the administrator looked intently at Marcus, waiting for him to ask his questions. However, Marcus had not actually been expecting the administrator to listen to him, and now he had to rack his brain on what to ask. With only 3 questions to ask, he had to pick the right ones since this was probably the only chance he would get. Unfortunately, Marcus had so many questions he wanted answers to, but he had only been given 3 possibilities. What the hell am I supposed to ask about? Trying his best to come up with some questions, Marcus spent a good 3 minutes thinking about it before the administrator said, "Remember, I am in a hurry, so if you take too long I will just leave. I am only doing you a favor here because you did one for me." Receiving this warning, Marcus sent his mind into overdrive, trying to pick out the correct question, and eventually settled on one of the ones that had been gnawing at him for a while. What is this world's purpose? Chapter 443, Questions and Answers. Transmigrated as a Ghost. Shrugging her shoulders, the administrator did not look very concerned about this question and responded saying, "It is meant to make people stronger. I set things up so anyone could reach the peak so long as they put in enough effort. Other than that, I guess it does serve as some entertainment for me from time to time. Though I am normally too busy to be paying close attention here." The administrator then took another sip of her seemingly endless cup of hot chocolate, waiting for Marcus to ask his next question. Sadly, the answer he had just gotten was not exactly what he wanted, since he had also been hoping that the administrator would give away what her goal was in making people stronger. Of course, Marcus could think of a few, but some of them, like being fattened up for slaughter, were not very pleasant, so he pushed them to the back of his mind. Looks like she is only going to give me direct and straightforward answers. I need to be more careful with what I ask in order to get more information. With his first question being answered, Marcus now had quite a few more, but there was one that had been bugging him for the longest time. And even though it might not help him in any way, he just had to know. How did I die back on Earth? Hearing this, unlike his first question, the administrator put on a devilish smile that gave Marcus chills, and said, "Are you sure you want to know the answer to that? It is not like it matters at this point since you are already here and have come this far. Anyway, have you not already been told that you died in a gas leak? Are you saying that you were lied to?" After the administrator said this to him, Marcus stared at her intently, trying to figure out what she really wanted. She had answered his first question readily and without any pretext, but now she was playing mind games. Unfortunately, her expressions and tone were hard to decipher, and Marcus found it impossible to gauge what she actually wanted. Either she really did not want to tell Marcus the answer to this question, or she was trying to steer him away from a worthless question he already knew the answer to. Or maybe she was just messing with him and did not care either way and was just having some fun at his expense. He really could not tell, even though he was pretty good at reading people. No, I already asked the question knowing it might be fruitless. I just have to know to get it out of the back of my mind. With a resolute expression, Marcus looked at the administrator and said, "Yes, I really want to know. Please tell me how I died." The administrator, after hearing this, began laughing. An almost diabolical laugh that made Marcus shudder. "I really did not think you would ask me about that. Oh, well, not that it really matters. But if you must know, you did die from a gas leak. It was just a freak accident that happened because of shoddy workmanship." Hearing this, Marcus let out a sigh of relief, even though the administrator had been gaslighting him a bit. He was relieved to hear that he had not been killed in some otherworldly plot he did not understand, but also a bit let down to hear that his death was nothing special. However, what the administrator said next got his attention. "Since you just asked a worthless question, I will give you a bit of a freebie. During your time to ask questions when you had first died, I had it cut off short so that you would not find out that you were going to be a ghost. I thought it would be funny, and I did not want you to go back on your wish to be untouchable." Rolling his eyes and groaning, Marcus had figured something like that had happened, but at least now he had confirmation that the administrator had indeed been messing with him. Still, even though the start had been really rough, and he nearly lost his sanity, he was doing pretty well now, and being a ghost had already given him plenty of opportunities he would not have had otherwise. "Now you have one more question. I recommend you make it count." Taking a minute to think, Marcus felt like he could ask the administrator another 1,000 questions and not have his curiosity satiated. Yet a certain question came to mind and Marcus figured it might be worth a shot. "Would you tell me your entire life story?" Frowning, the administrator obviously did not want to talk about herself. "Sorry, that would take far too long, and I have no intention of revealing anything directly about myself to you at this time. Hurry up and ask your final question. My time is running thin." Seeing that he had upset the administrator with his last question, Marcus could only shrug it off and try again. He thought it was unlikely that the administrator would answer that question, but it certainly would have given him a great deal of information if she had. "Okay, then can you tell me what you have planned for me and Roxine?" Smiling, the administrator looked more pleased by this question and said, "For you directly, I have no plan per se, but I do have hopes. If one day you grow strong enough, I would not mind having you work under me. It is always helpful to have strong allies. But I am not one to bind others, so you are free to do as you please." As for Roxine, while she is free to do as she wishes, I assume she would like to rejoin her parents and I after she exceeds the peak of this world and is able to protect herself from our enemies. After finishing answering Marcus' last question, the administrator stood and the chair she had been sitting on and the hot chocolate she was drinking disappeared. "I will need to be going now, but it has been good to talk to the two of you. Oh, and keep your eyes out for any similar books. If you find any, make sure to send me a message. I have enabled that function in your personal status. Just make sure not to contact me frivolously, I am a busy person." The administrator then began leaving when she abruptly stopped and turned around. "Oh, and just a bit of advice before I leave. You should search those crystal caverns around Raisha's shrine more thoroughly. You may find something useful down there." With those last words, the administrator left Marcus' tent and disappeared into the blizzard, heading on her way. Once she was gone, the tension Marcus had been feeling left all at once and he fell back on his cot, his head pounding. He then looked towards Roxine, who had a forlorn expression on her face, and for a minute thought about asking her some more questions about the administrator. No, she already told me she would not. Anyway, I already learned a lot and can figure out the rest later. For now, I need to focus on what is going on around me at this moment, instead of what may or may not be in the future. Chapter 444, Rebellion's Continued Growth. Transmigrated as a ghost. Once the blizzard that had locked down the rebel strike team and freed prisoners began to subside, they began their journey once again, heading to a rebel base. Of course, this was not their main base, as each of the freed prisoners that they were recruiting still needed to be scrutinized to make sure they were not agents working for the kingdom. "He is telling the truth. He is telling the truth. She is telling the truth. He is lying. I believe he intends to betray us when the opportunity arises." Going through all of the prisoner, Teja, with her ability to understand a person's true nature, questioned everyone. However, unlike how she used to be, always having a slight smile on her face or at least giving off a peaceful aura, now she was stone-faced and seemed like a robot. She had certainly taken the death of her brother very hard, and at least for now, had done everything she could to suppress her emotions. It was quite sad to see, since she used to be so vibrant, but now was almost dead inside. Still, she was doing her job well, and helped to out 12 people that had intended to betray them, 3 of which were actually agents of the kingdom. Luckily, preparations had been made beforehand so that no one had been able to send a message while they were on the move and disclose the party's location. Well, I am certain that none of them plan on betraying us right now, thought that could change in the future. I recommend that you keep an eye on each of the great knights and elite mages especially, Teja said to Merrick after finishing interviewing the last person. After that she got up and excused herself, saying she would go back to her room, and that she could be found there if anything was needed of her. Sighing, Merrick was not certain what to do with Teja's current mental and emotional state. Unless she was given a task to do, all she did was sit alone in her tent. When meals were ready, she would eat alone, and was just generally unfriendly and cold to anyone that tried to talk to her. Hopefully some time is all she needs. If this keeps up, she may not be fit to be a captain anymore, Merrick thought as he watched Teja walk away. Now that all of the freed prisoners had been looked over, and the ones that would be problems had been taken care of, it was time to get back to work. First and foremost, Merrick and the rebel captains came up with a good loyalty test. The freed prisoners led by Argus were going to attack and raid one of the kingdom's adamantine mines. Adamantine was one of, if not the most important resource that Trey-Lenstein had. Their kingdom, making a good deal of its money through sales to foreign merchants who brought the rare and powerful metal to other nations that did not have their own supply. So, if the released prisoners were able to successfully ransack one of these mines, it would go a long way towards advancing the rebellion's goals and to prove their allegiance. As for Marcus, he had absolutely nothing to do with this mission. Now that the prison break was over, he was back to his usual job, being a cargo plane. The rebellion's supplies had started to dwindle during his absence, and now he was having to work overtime, flying from the borders of the Kingdom of Borealia to pick up supplies and taking them all over to the rebellion's bases. It was grueling work, but he was the only one with the unlimited stamina, large item box, and necessary stealth capabilities to pull it off. This went on for a couple of months and soon the beginning of winter was upon them. Still at the very least, he had been given a pass this year from reporting to help in the Kingdom of Borealia in compliance of the contract he signed, as he had already been working for them as a liaison for the Trey-Lenstein rebellion. Yet, on the day of the first snowfall, Marcus received a message from Lyra that something big was about to happen, and that he was expected to be in attendance for the meeting where for the first time all of the rebellion's higher UPS would be gathering. Got it. I just need to deliver the inventory I have now to the base in Valenris, and pick up Roxine. So, I should be able to be there by tomorrow, Marcus said in response to Lyra's summons over his sending stone. Guess I need to speed up a bit. Going all out on flying, Marcus increased his speed drastically by burning through his spiritual energy at a tremendous rate. Luckily, he was already close to the city of Valenris where one of the rebellion's most important bases was located. Once he had arrived, he unloaded everything he had in his item box and the numerous magic bags on his person, before taking off to where Roxine currently was. Ah, there she is. After flying for around 6 hours, Marcus finally made it to wild area he had left Roxine in. Floating down to her, Marcus reappeared right next to her, and was immediately greeted by a series of surprised yaps followed by angry growls. However, before any of the surrounding wolves could make a move against him, Roxine let out commanding growl, and all of the wolves obeyed their alpha's command and backed down. Looks like you made yourself at home. When you said you wanted to take this time to get stronger and explore on your own, I never figured that you would assemble such a large pack, Marcus said as he looked out at the dozens of different wolves that were following his beast companion. In fact, it was a bit surreal to see since Roxine looked quite tiny in comparison to most of the wolves in her pack, as she was still growing and was only around 50% bigger than when she had first popped out of her egg. Yes, I happened to get in a tangle with an alpha wolf over one of my earlier kills and won. After that I slowly built up a following as more packs challenged me, until I became the queen of this forest. But I am glad you are here. As much fun as this has been, the charm is starting to wane, and I miss sleeping on a clean bed and eating your cooking. So, I am ready to leave whenever you are. Are you sure you want to leave all of these guys on their own? What will happen once you are gone? Scratching her ear, a telltale sign she was not really interested, Roxine said, I really could not care less. They all began following me on their own, and I truthfully have little in common with them. None of them have intelligence, so it is akin to if you were surrounded by normal monkeys. Shrugging his shoulders, Marcus gave one last look at the pack of wolves that had assembled under Roxine's banner, before putting her into his companion storage and disappearing. Chapter 445, Rebellion's Big Move. Transmigrated as a ghost. With Roxine collected from her recent forest home, Marcus took to the air and began flying towards the main rebel base. Level 21 is pretty good. You must have worked pretty hard over these last couple months, Marcus said, while making idle conversation with Roxine. He had not had very much opportunity to talk with others in the last few weeks, and he was quite happy to have someone to converse with while flying. After doing this for months on end, it had gotten supremely boring to be flying everywhere all the time, and even the beautiful views had begun to lose their luster. He had tried calling Rzivi and talking to her more often, but she was apparently exploring the deepest and most dangerous parts of the swamp and was unable to talk for long periods of time. Still, she always made sure to keep their normal schedule of once every 3 days, and she made sure to get updates about the rebellion and Marcus' condition. Yeah, there were a few rough patches where I was on the back foot, but the beasts and monster of that forest underestimated me, and I turned the tables on them all. Though I must admit the level 6 magic skills you have shared with me were quite helpful, Roxine said, responding to Marcus. The two of them then continued to talk in order to pass the time until they arrived back at the rebels' main base. Once they entered inside the maze of tunnels that used to be the home of gargantuan rats, Marcus immediately noticed that things were livelier than ever. Hundreds of people were moving with purpose through the large tunnel system, in droves far greater than Marcus had ever seen. Something big really must be happening. Seeing that things were quite serious, Marcus quickly made his way to the Mithril Tower that served as the meeting place for the rebellion's leadership. On the way he made sure to contact Lyra, and she told him to hurry up since the meeting had already started around 15 minutes ago. Stop there? The leaders are having a closed meeting right now and we have been instructed not to let anyone inside. If you have some business in the tower or with any of the captains, you will have to wait. One of the guards standing outside the tower said to Marcus as he approached. Looking over the guards standing in front of the tower, Marcus did not recognize any of them, and he assumed they also did not recognize him. While he had gained quite a bit of notoriety at first, now that he had been spending copious amounts of time delivering supplies and the rebellion had grown exponentially, less people recognized his face. Still, he simply pulled out his token that identified him as a captain of the rebel army, which had been awarded to him after the successful prison break. Seeing this, the 4 guards looked a bit shocked, since they thought that all of the leaders were already inside. "We are sorry, Captain Jed. You are free to enter," the lead guard said as he opened up the tower door for Marcus to enter. Walking inside, Marcus saw that the normally bustling first floor was completely empty, not a single soul to be seen. But he did hear voices coming from above, and quickly made his way to the top floor where the other rebel leaders had gathered. When he entered the room, he noticed that there were 26 people gathered around the normal meeting table, which was far more than usual. "I am saying that it is too rash for us to make this move right now. We would be risking millions of lives. What good is it to gain a victory if those we were hoping to help just end up dead? No, I agree, now is the time to stake our claim. We have built ourselves up and are able to challenge the kingdom now. If we delay, it could make things more challenging in the future." As he moved to take his seat next to Lyra, a heated argument was already underway about what the rebel army's next move should be. "Mind giving me a quick update?" Marcus asked to Lyra over telepathy. He had no idea what the current argument was about, though it was obviously quite important. "Sure. Right now, we are discussing whether it is time to stake our claim on some of the kingdom's territory and openly oppose them. Truthfully, I am not sure if it is a bad or a good idea. It has both its merits and its demerits. Also, they are currently trying to figure out which part of the kingdom would be most strategic to take over," Lyra said, apprising Marcus of the situation. And just a few moments after he had arrived, Argus, who was now the second in command of the rebel army after gathering numerous achievements, starting with his successful raid of one the kingdom's adamantine mines, stood up to speak. He had taken this position when Tisha stepped down and became more reserved, no longer wishing to be an active leader of the rebellion. At least though she was still a member and would do her duty when asked to, but she was much more withdrawn now, far from how she used to be. "I understand that some of you have concerns about facing the kingdom head-on at this point, but now is the time. Our forces are stronger than ever, and our men and women are ready to fight. The people suffer every day that the king and the nobles that follow behind him like sheep rule. If we wait too long, the king may begin taking drastic action such as culling entire cities where civil unrest is prevalent. We need to make sure his attention is always on us, so this does not happen. That is why I purpose we make our new public base the Duchy of Augustin." Once Argus had finished announcing his plan, he looked towards Lyra, as did many of the other rebel leaders. This was because the region that Argus wanted the rebel army to claim was where her parents used to rule. So, if Lyra came forward, she could claim her birthright and become the Duchess of her parents' former territory. Of course, they would have to usurp the current ruler that had been put in charge by the royal family, who was her cousin, but with the full backing of the rebel army this would be an easy feat. Taking a deep breath and steeling herself, Lyra stood up and said, "I would very much wish to take back my parents' legacy, but I do not wish to risk the lives of the citizens. There is no doubt in my mind that the kingdom will send a retaliatory force led by my master the moment we take over. If we were to engage in a full-blown war in the Augustin Duchy, it could be razed to the ground." However, even after Lyra's objection, Argus was not willing to give up and said, "Would you rather allow your people to continue to suffer? They have been hit especially hard since your parents' deaths. It is also quite likely that the king in the not-so-near future may even use them as an example of what happens to dissenters, since the region is full of people that oppose the current king's rule. We should make the first move before the king does it for us. You, Jadzia Augustin, should take your rightful place, not only the people of your duchy, but the entire kingdom." Chapter 446, Taking Action. Transmigrated as a ghost. After giving one last impassioned speech to Lyra, Argus sat down and waited for her decision. Ultimately, she would need to agree with his plan before any other steps were taken, or other arguments were thrown out. If she refused, the plan would be a wash no matter how much support the other leaders piled on top of this plan, since without Lyra, they would not be able to seamlessly win over the people of her home. Taking a moment, Lyra seriously thought about what she wanted to do. If she took her place as a duchess, and claimed her parents' former territory as her own, she would immediately put a target on the entire region. However, she could not deny that Argus had made some good points, and her inaction could cause even more suffering to her people. Marcus, what do you think I should do? Lyra asked, confiding in him. I believe that you should do it. The rebellion has made great progress, and it is time for it to strike. If we wait too much longer, the momentum that we have built up might diminish. Ultimately though, it is your call. I will back you on whatever you want. Having received Marcus' advice, Lyra looked out resolutely at all of the other rebel leaders and said, very well. I have taken your words to heart, Argus, and after considering our options I am willing to take my place as the leader of the Augustan Duchy. We can then declare it the domain of the rebellion and openly fight against the crown's tyranny. After she said this, Lyra sat down and waited for the other leaders to voice their opinions. This was a major step for the rebellion, and they needed to make sure that it was the right move. Hours of back and forth discussion went by as the different leaders said their piece in favor or against the idea. But in the end the majority agreed to the plan, and it was decided that in 2 weeks the rebellion would make a formal declaration of war against the crown by occupying the Augustan Duchy. Now that our course of action is decided, all of you prepare your troops for departure. We are going to move in mass towards the duchy's capital city Valenheart. Merrick said at the end of the meeting. Things quickly wrapped up and everyone went their separate ways, other than Marcus and Lyra who stayed behind with Merrick to discuss the finer details of the plan. So how did you want to approach your cousin who is currently in charge? Merrick asked to Lyra. Immediately she answered and said, we should try to meet him diplomatically first. We have not seen each other for around 4 years, but he is not a bad person. I try to keep tabs on my home and from what I hear he is trying his best to keep things stable and follow in my parents' legacy best he can without angering the king and his supporters. I believe that he is only following the king in order to keep himself and his family safe. If we offer him our protection, he may give up his position to me without a fight. Nodding his head, Merrick agreed with Lyra's plan, hoping that bloodshed could be kept to a minimum. Very well. Once all of our troops have moved to their assigned positions, I will go with you to meet with your cousin. I do very hope he will give up peacefully. Merrick then turned to Marcus and said, and what will you do? We have not assigned any formal role for you, but your abilities make you flexible and able to fill many positions. Looking at Lyra, Marcus had already made up his mind and said, I will be sticking with my friend as a bodyguard. While I certainly support what you are doing here, I would not be putting my life and time on the line if not for her. My only goal is to make sure she survives. I see. I suppose for your goal that would be for the best while we make this transition. It is possible that an assassin may be sent first to get rid of Jadzia and throw our plan into turmoil. Merrick said, consenting to Marcus' action. Of course, Lyra was a bit conflicted, since she wanted to believe that she could take care of herself. But if things really did take a turn for the worse, having Marcus who was a bit stronger than her around would be useful. Sighing, Lyra agreed to allow Marcus to act as her protector for the time being, since she was about to paint an even larger target on her back. Good. Now that we have resolved that, I need to make sure everything is well organized. We need to move out fast in order to get to the duchy's capital before the snows become too heavy, Merrick said, ending their private meeting. After that, Marcus followed Lyra back to her base where she managed the men and women in her squad. Nox, we are moving out in 2 days. Make sure that everyone in our squad is ready to go. Also, I have a special assignment for you and Magda. The 2 of you will be acting as my servants while I transition into my new role, and until things have become more stable. Also, I know that you dislike him, but Jed is also going to be accompanying me as added protection, Lyra said to Nox, her top lieutenant. Nodding his head, he naturally was more than willing to follow his captain's orders, but whenever he glanced at Marcus his displeasure was obvious. Once she was finished talking to Nox, Lyra went to her room, and Marcus followed. As soon as she entered, she jumped onto her bed and the stoic form she had been showing vanished. The fatigue that had been building up in her and the recent nerves that she had been accumulating were allowed to show. Roxine, would you mind? Sure, it is no problem. Hopping out of Marcus' companion storage, Roxine went over to Lyra's side and laid down next to her and brushed her fur against Lyra's face. The 2 of them had gotten closer over Marcus' time with the rebel army, and now Roxine and Lyra were pretty good friends. Not long after Roxine moved over to her, Lyra grabbed the young wolf and buried her face into her soft fur. I am going to make something to eat. What would the 2 of you like? Marcus said to Roxine and Lyra. Immediately Roxine responded asking for puff cow fillets, while Lyra asked for something a bit more unusual, wanting a rabbit risotto with mushrooms. Okay, just give me a few minutes to go and find some rabbit and we'll cook that up for the 2 of you. Leaving Lyra and Roxine alone, Marcus went in search of a rabbit, and luckily was able to find one that had been hunted not too long ago. He then brought it back to Lyra's room and began cooking up a special meal for her in order to help her nerves. How is it? Marcus asked Lyra as she took her first bite. It is perfect. It reminds me of home, Lyra said as she began crying. Apparently, this was a dish that was often served in her house and was one of her and her mother's favorites. Lyra quickly devoured all of what Marcus made, and by the time she was finished she looked quite refreshed, and it was obvious that she had calmed down quite a bit. Thank you for that, Marcus. You have been a better friend than I ever could have hoped for. I doubt I can ever repay you for all you have done for me. Chapter 447, Scouting Valenheart. Transmigrated as a ghost. After Marcus spent some time helping Lyra with her worries, he took the next couple of days to rest and maintain his gear. Yet, the time seemed to move almost too quickly and the day of the rebellion's move on Lyra's home was here. During this time Marcus stuck next to Lyra, acting as a member of her squad. Luckily, the movement of troops went off well, and other than a few close calls with magical beasts and monster no real problems were encountered. Currently the bulk of the rebel army was waiting in the hilly forest nearby Lyra's home city of Valenheart. So that is Valenheart. Marcus thought as he started at the city from up high. He was currently on a reconnaissance mission to scout of the city and make sure that no ambushes were waiting for the rebel army. Naturally he was the best choice for this type of mission, since he could go pretty much anywhere and was unnoticeable by almost everyone. It is around the size of Lauersend in Boralia I would guess, though the two cities are definitely much different. Even from where he was, he could see the stunning waterways that webbed through the city, creating the canals that were used instead of roads. Looking at the city, Marcus was reminded of places from Earth like Cape Coral, Venice, and Amsterdam, which were all known for their canals. However, Valenheart was not exactly the same, in that all of its waterways were freshwater, being fed by two large rivers that met perpendicularly like a cross. It actually reminded Marcus a bit of River Landing, though Valenheart was far larger, and had rivers that allowed it to transport and receive goods from pretty much anywhere in the kingdom. Once Marcus had finished taking in the site of the largest hub within Trellenstein, he began his descent into the city. The first thing he did was to investigate the kingdom's forts and garrisons to make sure that no exceptionally strong force was already lying in wait. There do not appear to be any really strong combatants around. There is certainly a great deal of soldiers, but most of them are only around level 10 to 15 and are just more of a suppression force against unrest. Still, I have only checked the normal installations. Now it is time to dig deeper. Having finished checking all of the most obvious places, Marcus turned his investigation towards the castle that was once Lyra's home and was the seat of power in the city. It was quite the grand building and Marcus guessed it was about 200,000 square feet in total. The castle also stood in the middle of the two large rivers where they both met, on an artificial island and was connected to the rest of the city by 4 large bridges, each extending from the 4 cardinal directions. Normally this would make it quite difficult to infiltrate, and Marcus certainly found that the security was not lacking. But it made little difference to him. He simply slipped in and began a thorough search of the castle for any hidden troops. Bingo! Finding what he was looking for, Marcus came across a high-level regiment of soldiers that were led by a great knight and an elite mage. Of course, at this point Marcus had already been given the description of all of the kingdom's top fighters and mages, but he had actually already met this great knight. It was the 10th ranked Great Knight Edic, and the one that he had blown away with his railgun during Sibber's ambush. Looks like they have shored up their defenses here in case of an attack. Unfortunately for them, it does not look like we're ready for the entire rebellion to invade. After finding Edic and his troops, Marcus continued searching the castle and soon came across Lyra's cousin. He was currently sitting at a desk in his room and was going over and filling out stacks of documents. In fact, the poor guy looked less like a noble and more like an overworked office employee right now. Also, unlike Lyra who was a full-blooded fox beast person, her cousin was only half, his ears and tail being less pronounced. Taking a look at the documents Marcus found them to be unnoteworthy and they were just about day-to-day operations of the city. Moving along he investigated the nearby rooms and found the current Duke's family all sleeping together. His wife and 2 children were currently snuggled up together and sleeping peacefully. For just a moment Marcus even felt bad that he and the rebel army were going to ruin this peaceful scene, but hopefully after everything was over they would be better off for it. Once he was satisfied with this area, he quickly finishing up the rest of the castle, and did not find any other hidden forces. Still, he was not satisfied yet, and began doing random sweeps of the city, searching in nestled-away buildings and even under the canals. Fortunately, he did not find any sort of extra army waiting below the city, though he did discover some seedy areas that were engaged in questionable business at best. Yeah, this is not lasting another night. Marcus thought as he looked at one of the most deplorable practices he had found. In a large underground warehouse, were hundreds of children that were caged up and being sold as slaves. Marcus already had a natural distaste for slavery, and as he watched all of these kids being corralled, his rage began to rise as he remembered what had happened to Lilia. Iron Golem. Conjuring his Iron Golem, Marcus gave it the command to kill all of the slavers and their goons. Quickly a massacre occurred as Marcus' Iron Golem flattened all of the slavers that tried to fight back, and Marcus wrapped up the fleeing ones with his tendrils of shadows and used his life drain ability on them until they were only lifeless husks. It honestly looked like a scene out of a horror movie, but Marcus made sure that not a single one of these slavers that traded in children survived. Once he had finished that up and cleaned up the mess so as to not scar the children even further, he took the form of Ludwig and began freeing all of the children from their cages and bindings. I have dealt with all of the bad people that locked you up in cages. Now I need all of you to stay here for a couple of days. My friends and I will be back then, and make sure that those of you that have a home to get back to reach there and those of you without are taken care of. After saying that, Marcus did his best to comfort the kids, and left them a large store of food to eat until he could come back. He then pulled out a large magic core from a level 40 plus monster and cast his Iron Golem spell again. This time the Iron Golem formed around the core and would allow it to last for quite a bit longer and work automatically. Though eventually the golem would still disappear like usual after it burned up the magic core sustaining. Protect the kids until I return. Make sure that if anyone come by you capture them, or if that is impossible kill them, Marcus said, giving his Iron Golem its orders. After taking one last glance and saying a few words of reassurance to the frightened kids, Marcus left the underground warehouse and began making his way back towards the rebel camp. Now that he had finished scouting out the city, they were going to make their move soon, and if all went well, the capital of the duchy would be under the rebel army's control. Chapter 448, Preparations. Transmigrated as a ghost. Once Marcus returned to where the rebels had set up their temporary base, he made sure to give every detail possible he had found out about the city's defenses. Lyra, what do you think? Marcus asked her once he had told them everything he had learned. They have definitely increased the presence of the kingdom's army by a wide margin. Before my parents were executed, there was only one base in the city, and the rest of the security was handled by a local militia and the knights that had sworn fealty to my parents and their subordinates. Lyra said with a concerned expression on her face. She then pulled out a very detailed map of her home city and circled all of the barracks that used to house the city's militia. Yeah, most of these buildings have been occupied by the kingdom's soldiers, and it looks like the local militia has been cut down in size and relegated to just these 6 barracks. Frowning, Lyra was certainly not happy to hear how Here City was basically under martial law. Also, they have set up around a dozen more installations that are filled to the brim with soldiers. Luckily most of the are greenhorns of around level 10 or so, which should not be much of a problem in the grand scheme of things. Circling the areas where the kingdom had set up addition barracks, Lyra now had a map that detailed the locations and relative strength of the kingdom's forces within the city. Okay, let us go around and inform the other captains about what we have found, Lyra said as she rolled up her map. Though Marcus was a bit confused, since he wondered why they were not going straight to Merrick. What about Merrick? Looking around, Lyra made sure that the two of them were truly alone, before using telepathy to say, the chief is currently busy making preparations to use a new unique skill he acquired around 3 weeks ago. I do not know the details about it, but it is apparently not easy to use, and he needs to take at least a few hours a day to control. Once she had finished telling Marcus this, she beckoned him to follow her so that the two of them could give out the information they had gathered to all of the other rebel leaders. Quickly, all of the rebel leaders were given maps similar to the one Lyra had, each with the military targets circled. And by the time they had finished that, Merrick had come out of his seclusion. Whoa, what the hell happened to you? Marcus said as soon as they entered Marek's tent to meet with him. Unlike normal, the tough old man who usually exuded an aura of strength and wisdom, looked his age and was breathing heavily while soaked in sweat. Breathing heavily, Merrick said, it is nothing. Just some intense training to make sure that I am prepared. He then shakily sat up and waited for Lyra and Marcus to explain the situation. I see. This is both disconcerting but also poses an opportunity. Eddic is strong and could be a problem, but this is a good opportunity to deal with one of the kingdom's strongest fighters. Jadzia and Jed, I would like you to gather all of the other captains for a meeting in 8 hours. Now if you would not mind, I need to rest. Merrick said as he laid back down, obviously exhausted. Leaving Marek's tent, Marcus and Lyra went their separate ways and informed all of the other captains about the meeting Merrick had called. Once that was done, the two of them got some rest themselves, as they waited until it was time for the meeting. I am glad to see that everyone has arrived safely. Now it is time we assign each squad to a specific area. Merrick then pulled out one of the maps that had detailed the kingdom's troop placements, and each of the captains were given an area to cover and targets to take over. We need to move fast and hit at the same time, to ensure that bloodshed is kept to a minimum. Most of the soldiers in the city are just rank and filers and probably only joined the army to have enough food to eat. If we can avoid it, I would like not to have to kill thousands of people. Now, we do know that Eddic is staying in the castle. Argus and Francis, I want the two of you to apprehend him. Take your best men who are at least level 40 and take him down. I do want him alive as possible though. Many of us know Eddic, and he is a good man, he is just following who he believes in. However, if it comes down to it, do not hesitate to kill him if it seems capture is impossible, or would endanger your men. Quickly the rebels' plan of attack was ready down to the last detail. So, we will strike just after dawn tomorrow. Now, take the rest of the day to inform your men and women about the plan. Make sure that all of your equipment is in working order and get plenty of rest. This may be the last chance we have to sleep comfortably until the war is over, Merrick said, ending the meeting. After that everyone went their separate ways to get everything in order, and make sure their troops were ready. Here, take this, Marcus said to Lyra as they headed back to their camp. Looking at the small potion vial in Marcus' hand, Lyra wondered what it was for a moment before recognizing the contents of the potion. Marcus, where did you get this? Lyra said, unable to contain her astonishment. I took it off of Tyval during our battle. I want you to have it since my regeneration abilities are already pretty high. I would feel a lot better if I knew you had it, Marcus said as he pushed the vial into Lyra's hands. A bit hesitantly, she took the true elixir that Marcus had handed her and looked at it in awe for a bit until storing it away into her item box. A true elixir could heal almost any wound or dispel any sort of negative effect. It truly was the strongest medicine that could be created and was beyond rare. And while the lesser version was more readily available, the effects could barely be compared as a true elixir was easily 20 times stronger. Marcus then proceeded to surprise Lyra even more and pulled out an adamantine band and handed to her. Go ahead and send some man into it, Marcus said to Lyra as he tossed it to her. Doing as he asked, Lyra sent her mana into the band and quickly it formed into a sturdy shield. Though Lyra frowned at seeing this and said, as much as I appreciate this, you know I fight with 2 weapons, so I cannot effectively use a shield while fighting. However, Marcus countered her and said, naturally I know that. This shield is special. Now use the command word protect. Looking at the shield with interest and confusion, Lyra said the command word and the shield detached from her arm and began floating around her. I originally made this for myself using the leftover adamantine I was given, but I want you to have it. It is based off of a shield that my master made, though in comparison to his it is not as good. Still, it should help to protect you. Now I have a few last-minute tests I need to perform, so take some time to familiarize yourself with that shield while I am gone.